All right, I'm back and ready to do some cartooning. It took a little bit to get my kid to sleep, and then in the interim, like I did a few flats here and flats there, so I made a little bit of progress from the last stream. But anyhow, for those of you tuning in for the first time, I'm Joshua Kemble. I'm a cartoonist, graphic designer, and I've been an art director for about 8 years. And when I'm not art directing, cartooning, or doing graphic design, I am working on comics, graphic novels. I have two graphic novels that I've completed that have been published. One is called Two Stories, which is a story about autobiographical graphic novel, like in the lines of like an American Splendor type underground indie comic that talks about my journey dealing with depression. And that is called Two Stories, and that's available on Amazon. And then also for pre order right now is my book, Jacob's Apartment, which is my graphic novel, slice of life, coming of age story that discusses the types of questions that can cause somebody to lose even the strongest of faith. And that is out on June 7th from Graphic Mundi. And for those of you in the Toronto area, I'll be at TCAF signing comics at their booth during the end of June. You can just look that up on the events page. And then at the beginning of July, I'll also be doing a signing in Palmdale at Barnes and Noble for the release of Jacob's Apartment. And that'll do it for plugs and stuff. Let's get back to coloring pages for the comic book Not Death But Love, the strange supernatural story of Elizabeth Barrett Browning. So, and then Landon is in the chats and said, "What's up, Josh? How's it going, Landon? How you doing?" So let's get back to this. So last I left, I had just started the process of flatting, and then I had to go read to my kid and read him bedtime stories and stuff. And then now we're gonna get back to it. So here we are. So that's a little bit. I got a little bit further, but we still have quite a bit of flatting left to do. My goal is to finish flatting this page, and then hopefully by the end of this stream, we'll be done with that. It might take a little bit of time because of the paintings in the background, but we have made some progress. I'm also unsure about this yellow tone. So if you're watching the chats, you guys can let me know if the yellow seems too much. I looked at Victorian interiors. Unfortunately, there's like no reference in existence of Victorian interiors from that time that are specific to 50 Wimple. It sounds like 50 Wimple Street had like a blue door from everything I could read. And so because of that, I've made the door blue on both the back and the front. And I'm pulling a lot of colors, like for instance, the rug color from previous panels. But yeah, I'm still unsure about that yellow tone. So we'll see how that sits. I know I wanted like this whole bottom section to be made in wood. I also noticed a few areas like here where I accidentally kind of skipped shading. And so I definitely need to do a little bit of shading in there. And there's a few little areas I need to patch up that I have come across. But I think we're in pretty good shape so far. So let's proceed forward and we can kind of polish that stuff up as we go. Landon said, "I'm doing okay. I've been oil painting recently. Have you ever oil painted?" Yeah, I actually love oil painting. I took a life painting class, actually a few life painting classes with this guy Yuji at Cal State Long Beach, who was like an expert at doing wet on wet life painting, like oil painting with color comparison. And man, like one of my passions actually is oil painting. And I think in another life I'd be like an oil painter. But I ended up choosing commercial art. And I do have this fantasy of doing just some painting between books, but I don't know when that'll happen. I at this point, right now, it seems like by the time I'm wrapped on a book, I usually have another book project lined up. But if I ever have like some free time, oil painting just it's once you kind of understand oils and how they work, and you kind of use them for what they're good for, they can be really frustrating when you're just beginning in art. But it's like once you kind of know what you're doing a little bit, it just becomes super fun to work on oil paintings. So yeah, Landon, I'd love to see what you come up with. Um, yeah, and then one of the funnest things to me with oil paint is like to actually do it from life. It's just like a real love of mine. It's weird. It's something I definitely pursued and learned in art school. But I haven't pulled out the oil paints in forever. And one of the reasons is like, first off, like there is no scentless terpenoid unless they changed it. The scentless terpenoid is just a fiction. like, I wish it weren't, but it just totally seems to be. Um, and then aside from that, like, uh, it's just so much setup. Like because the oil stay wet forever, it's just like a long setup period. And unfortunately, like with my windows of time in art, like I just don't usually have time to set up a palette to where I can like store it and reuse it. But I will say, man, oil painting, yeah, good question. But yeah, oil painting is like one of my favorite things in the world. Um, Landon said, "Why did you choose commercial art over oil painting?" Well, I mean, you can oil paint commercially. It's just hard to do because of the dry time, and then also obviously the setup time. Um, but for me, it was more of like I like comics. I like storytelling, and I have stories I want to tell, and they need to be told in more than one image, and they need to be told in text. And in reality, I kind of think of comics as like this is going to sound snobby, but for me, for my preferences, I think that comic books are the best form of art there is in the world. Um, and I and that comes from somebody who's like a huge fan of painting and like painting that you wouldn't think, coming from a cartoonist. Like I'm not talking like most cartoonists. Well, I shouldn't say most, but a lot of cartoonists, if they talk about liking oil painting, they're talking about like Frazetta or like a fantasy illustrator, maybe the Hildebrands or something like that. And I love Frazetta and the Hildebrands, but I'm more talking like Cezanne and like Monet and like Lucian Freud. Like when I did do oil painting, that's more the type of painting I was doing. I should, not that it was as good as those people, but it's just, it was more in those lines where it was like really thick uh, about form and paint and color. And so, like, I wouldn't use a lot of, like, the color palette I'm using here. When I traditionally oil paint, or I should say oil painted, because at this point, this is like almost 15 years ago, 15 to 20 years ago. So it was a long ago that I used to do that. But when I would do it, I would do it very different, like with a different approach than like an illustrative approach. And I say that with the highest regard for illustration. So I don't mean that as like a negative about illustration. It's just like it was just more of like a fine art approach to things, which again, I don't even really see a divide. As I said before, like why I even chose to do comics is because like I actually think comics are the peak of art. Like as corny as it is, if I think about the very form of expression that I prefer the most, it's a graphic novel more than anything. But I will say, man, yeah, there's definitely a side of me that would love to just do oil painting. He said, if you chose to use the Gamsol or the Mona Lisa brand odorless mineral spirits, it's not bad at all because the evaporation is different with those than with regular terps, which will kill you. Yeah, but I mean, the thing is, they're not odorless. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I'm getting at. There's still some smell there, so it's not like something you can do in your living room, or maybe you do it in your living room, but I wouldn't feel comfortable with like my 8-year-old in the house, um, even with odorless terpenoid or whatever. Um, then again, like I said, I haven't done it in a while, so maybe these are brands because I don't remember specifically the brand that I would use, and so maybe those are a little different than the brands that I was familiar with, you know. But I think if I were gonna take time off to paint just because of my limited time frame, um, although I will say you can do wet on wet with oils and end up doing fairly quick paintings. It's just a matter of like again dry time and storage and setup time. Um, but I can say like if I were gonna paint, I'd probably end up just using acrylics. I did some portraits just for fun that were like not really in the style that I used to paint in, but a little bit in the style I used to paint in of my family like a couple years back. And I actually did some videos on it. I think they're somewhere in my playlist as like creating a haunted mansion family portrait, which actually, if you look back on that, you can see why I'm so intrigued with like working on this Elizabeth Barrett Browning book because it's like you know I've always loved like haunted mansions and like old Victorian themed things. Like it's a weird passion of mine. So it's kind of fun. Like my wife and I. Well, I think I've talked about this on stream before, but we're like really obsessed with Jeremy Brett's BBC Panorama series of Sherlock Holmes. We like that whole just that whole vibe of that era. So it's really fun to like have an excuse to kind of work in that, even to do the research on this. Let me know what you guys think about this yellow though. Like Landon, do you think this yellow is working for a color? It feels like a color to establish that it's a different time of day than our previous page. It's a different room. I think maybe I have to finish the paintings on the wall to kind of get there. They developed the okay. Landon said they developed these to be different in the way they evaporate. So yeah, they are different than probably the stuff you used 15 years ago. They were specifically made for artists. Worth a try if you ever try oil painting again. Yeah, the other catch with oil painting, and I remember this, is just the price. Like oil paints are just crazy expensive. I mean, good paints of any kind are crazy expensive, but oil paints in particular, like I remember from that class, like the difference between when you drop like 20 bucks on a tube or 30 bucks on a tube, or you get those cheap sets that are like $5 a tube, it's like night and day. Like the pigments just way crappier on the cheap. And then it like kind of runs a little bit and it I don't know what that's called when like the oil kind of separates from the pigment and so you end up with this like kind of loose oil. That happens a lot with the cheaper oil paints, but like the really nice ones, they stay pretty steady. What's funny though, and this is the cool thing about oil paints, is if I decided to bust out the oil paints, like a crap load of my old oil paints that I still have might still be good. And they're from like 20 years ago, but they might still be good. They may not be dried up. And that's kind of one of the cool things too. Um, when I do oil paint though, I'm like a weird, again, the style that my teacher that I was like really interested in learning from. And so the way I learned was like very different than a lot of oil painting teachers where they use a lot of soft brushes and they do a lot of smoothing and stuff like that. He was more like in the lines of like Lucian Freud's later work where it's like you use like a flat brush. Like he studied Rembrandt's later technique. And so Rembrandt, when he was like younger, used to do a lot of smoothing. And then as he got older, he started just kind of doing more wet on wet. And so if you look at like um, Rembrandt's like later self portraits from when he was like older, it's so cool because it's like all done with like a flat brush. And so he didn't use like rounded soft brushes. He didn't use like any sort of feathering techniques. He just literally just was like putting chunks of paint and kind of painting in this way rather than like this. It's weird, but when I paint, I'm like it's almost weird, but it's almost hard to explain. But it's like even with this comic, it's like I think it's pretty clear if you're familiar with my style. Like there's some of my style that's coming through, but I'm an artist too. I can adapt my style and often will change my style depending on the medium. And so, um, even in this case, like with this book, you know, like working in this style isn't super unnatural to me. Um, and it's very different than the style I did Two Stories, which is very different than the style I did Jacob's Apartment in. And I think regardless, I think my style comes through, but the way that I paint with oils is very like aggressive and thick and like very painterly. So you see a lot of paint when I do it. Hopefully I'll be able to do it again though. So Landon, if I ever do, I'll hit you up. But I'd love to see what you're doing. At some point, I need to do a video if I ever have time where I'm not working on comics. I'd love to do a video where I show people like art from, you know, when I was working on like my BFA and my MFA in art at Cal State Long Beach, because there's a lot of like different approaches to art that I did. You know, I did a lot of watercolors, a lot of I really liked watercolors. We learned a lot of illustration principles using gouache, which is I think I might enjoy more now that I kind of have a better understanding of illustration. But I I kind of think at the time, I don't know. I mean, I could be crazy, but it's like from what I remember, gouache just felt like you were trying to paint with like the hardest medium in the world to paint with. And it had like, you know, if you were doing it right, you're supposed to do it kind of like thick, where it's like milky thick. But then if you did it milky thick, you had to be really accurate with like the color because it wouldn't really lay over. Like wash isn't like acrylic where it like lays on top of it itself. So that was a pain in the butt medium. And I had like a weird kind of crosshatchy style that I would use with that. But yeah, I mean, there's like all the traditional stuff, you know, from art school where, you know, a lot of charcoal, a lot of, you know, just traditional pencil art, all of that stuff. So there's like a part of that in my soul. And I like to think that it affects the way that I approach my art now, but it is interesting. Like if I were oil painting, you probably wouldn't see me touch the color black ever. Because one of my passions with like painting in that kind of way, at least at the time, maybe I'd approach it different now. But it's like I really liked the way that like if you look at like Cezanne and the way he'd like paint fruit, um, it was like incredible, like where he would find these areas of color and shadow. Um, so he like never, I mean, to my knowledge, I don't think the guy had a tube of black in his color palette. Like I think at most maybe some sepia, but he didn't like over sepia stuff like a lot of painters do. So like you'd see like these purple shadows against, you know, like a yellowish, you know, it'd be like a purplish blue shadow against a yellowish orange or something. You know what I mean? It anyhow, I'm totally rambling, but if you get me going on painting, I don't know. The other thing is another reason I chose not to really pursue painting is like it's kind of like picking your battles where um, so many fields are really hard to get into, and the gallery scene is like a whole different beast. And I know people who've pursued that, and it's you know it's a pursuit you can succeed at, and succeed to the point where you're not just like selling paintings at like coffee shops, but you're like doing like straight up like you know like Art Basel in Florida kind of stuff, where it's like these giant art fairs where you're selling your paintings for quite a bit. The problem is like it just requires as much dedication, if not more, than it does to get into comics. And so it's like one of those things of, well, I want to have graphic novels done. and I do like painting. If I died today and I left behind a bunch of paintings, would I feel as good as if I left behind a bunch of books? And I'm one of those weirdos who's like, oh, I want to leave behind a bunch of books. Like that's just the nature of who I am. So it's like I'd rather have my stuff in a library than like in a museum, you know. But I will say again, like I do think painting's really good. I think it's good to learn. I think it's like incredible. And I just went on a really long tangent about it, but it's like it's fun to think about because I don't really again, like I don't really do it as much anymore, but I really love it. Like I love it. I can critique it. I can understand the technique of it. I can really admire the guys that like like I will say if you're into oil painting like at all, check out Lucian Freud, but not like the earlier stuff where he drew people with like big eyes and stuff like that, but like the later stuff where it's like super thick and it's like really painting like skin tones as they actually look. So they're not the most flattering portraits. Like I think he did a portrait of like the queen or something that got like like I think they got really pissed off at it. Partially because it actually looked like a human being. Like it didn't look like flattering or nice. But anyhow, yeah, I'm I'm gonna stop talking about painting for your guys' sake. Let's see here. Um, Oh, Landon said, I wouldn't be the best judge if the yellow is working because I'm not sure what time of day or atmosphere you're going for. Maybe try adding a bit of red tones in there, muted orangish reds. Might complement with the yellows. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Frank is is linking to his Etsy. What about my Etsy, Frank? I'm just kidding. Feel free, Frank. You guys should check out Frank's Etsy. Frank is the best mod ever. Landon said, I have a bunch on my Instagram you could check out. I'll show my current stuff a little later. Cool. I'll check that out, Landon. Um, and then Landon said, I touch black, but a lot of times I mix it with another color. Um, yeah, and like that's a method to use, you know, with painting. It's just like my favorite kind of painting. This is just for oil paintings. It's like very much like I really appreciate when people maybe if you're darkening red, you could use like black with it. But I prefer like somebody find shadow tones and grays by like mixing complements and like kind of I don't know. It's a weird challenge, but I really like the color it brings out. And then it says, "Oh, Landon." Frank was saying, "Landon, I just had to approve your message." And then Landon was clarifying, "Yeah, I was talking about paint. Yeah, we're talking about paint here, guys." Um, and then Philip said, "You've been streaming for quite a while now." Not really, actually. I streamed for about an hour, and then I ended the stream, and I just started this one. So it hasn't actually been all that long. It just seems like it was long because I was streaming on one stream, and then you tuned into my second stream that I've been doing after kind of my kid was in bed. I do like the idea of some oranges maybe outside. Um, let's see what the with the shading. And here I'm like criticizing mixing the color black into the colors as an artist, you know, but it's like because it does desaturate, but also, I mean, what do I know? You know, here I am. I'm also working in a style, but this style that I'm working in is like is I don't know. It's weird. I feel like the medium changes. Like even when you're working on digital art, this is going to be a little weird tip thing, I think. But it's like I think if you're working on digital art, it tends to succeed really well if you get an idea of specifically the kind of medium you're trying to make. Like so, in this case, I realized like if I were doing this traditionally, this would be like probably done with like a black Prismacolor pencil and then tones of flat color underneath. Um, you know, and they'd probably be done separately and then kind of merged like at the printer, right? So that's kind of how I'm envisioning this style, is like it's almost like tinted plates. Um, that's what I'm kind of thinking here. But again, like having that, I have a limitation where it's like I really I can't do rendering on my color unless it is black. And then also it needs to be overlaid, with the exception of I can overlay white, because if I were working on this traditionally, I'd be able to use like a white colored pencil to kind of add a little bit of tone, but I probably wouldn't overdo it. So that's what I think about before I do digital. And it helps, I think, my digital have the proper like limitations, but also who knows, you know, again, I'm just saying my own opinion, you know. The nice thing about art is there really isn't like a right or wrong way. But again, you know, I have my preferences, especially with oil painting. Um, there's also just different approaches to oil painting. Like for instance, if you wanted to get like a Hildebrandt look, or like a, especially like a Frazetta look, like you'd be approaching it a lot different than like the way that I approached life drawing, or life painting, because it's just a totally different look you're going for, you know. And in that case, you should be like adding sepia and black and, you know, really getting in there, um, you know, because that's just the look. I will say I do like, I love working traditionally and I love mixing media. And so that's fun too. Yeah, there's all sorts of, I feel like we only have so many lifetimes, you know, but it is surprising to me. Like, I think a lot of people might actually be surprised by how many artists can work in various mediums and just like have to choose one out of pure necessity because of just time limits, you know. So I'm trying to see if we're getting there with the I like the idea of the frames kind of being almost like this gold. And this is kind of touching a little bit on your advice, Landon, of using like some oranges. If we have some gold frames, that seems very Victorian. So these are supposed to be like family portraits, kind of up in the corner here. Yeah, Landon was saying with acrylics they tend to be too saturated. You have to knock them down a bit. Yeah, and I mean I think the other catch is, you know, this is another thing about the weird way I learned how to paint. But it's like when I paint, usually I don't have more than 16 tubes of color. I think 16 is like the max I would ever need. And then I derive all other colors from just mixing those colors. And quite often it's like looking at the lightest element of an object and the darkest, and sort of doing color comparison, where it's saying, hey, is this lighter or darker than this spot? Is it warmer or cooler? And what color is it? Like basically asking those three questions. So it'd be like I'd look at the lightest area and be like, hey, that lightest area, is that area warm or cool? Is it light or dark? And what color is it? Is it like yellow or whatever it is? And then I'd use that to compare with the other colors. Um, it's an approach called color comparison, and I absolutely love it. Um, and I don't really use it a lot on digital art or comics. Although at some point it would be fun to do a painted comic, but I don't think I have the wherewithal. Like I think, like I've seen Jeff like paint entire comics, Jeff Lafferty, and it's incredible. But it's like, man, I don't know if I have I don't know if I have the stones or the wherewithal to like stick with something like that. That's an ambitious thing to take on. Although I will say, if you're into painted comics, there's one a long time ago called Moonshadow. I think it was, I think it might have been before DC Vertigo, but I know that I think DC Vertigo reprinted it. I have the graphic novel in my room, so at some point I'll have to just check who the publisher was. But so Moonshadow was a really impressive, like fully watercolored comic. Like the whole comic was done in watercolor, and I think it might have been like the first fully painted comic. And then there's Cages by Dave not Cages, my goodness. Cages is brilliant too, but that's ink. Mr. Punch by Dave McKeon is like, I think, done quite a bit in oils, and then using a lot of collage as well. But I do think he used oils in that book, and that's just like a like super inspiring like piece of art, like that book. It's kind of like a precursor to like the books, the kids' books that he did with Neil Gaiman. But yeah, and it's also a really devastating and good graphic novel as well. Let's see here. Yeah, Frank was saying Jeff is a beast when it comes to painting comics. Jeff is a beast when it comes to painting. I mean, the guy is just an incredible painter. And then, like, again, like my style of painting would be a lot different than Jeff's. Jeff's style of painting intrigues me, and there's so much craft and skill to it. I honestly don't know if I could pull it off. Like, I'm pretty good at the style that I studied, but like I don't know, his is a unique, it's like a specific technique that is just really incredible. And I think, yeah, I think I'd have to mess around a lot to get it right. And honestly, I don't think I'd ever get it down as good as Jeff, because Jeff is just like, yeah, he's got that style down, and it's incredible. It's you know, I think there aren't a lot of people who can paint like Jeff. I think that's just the case. I just don't think there's a lot of people out there who are that good. But yeah, and his style is really cool. His is like it's like the best of yeah, I can't even explain it. I mean, you guys have seen Jeff's stuff, so I don't know if I need to explain it. But I would definitely say, if you guys are watching this and you haven't seen Jeff's stuff, you should. Um, Landon was saying, I still can't tell if Jeff likes me. Then he said, haha, oh well, I think he's cool. I don't think anyone knows if Jeff likes him. But I mean, Jeff's a funny guy. He likes a lot of people. I'm sure he does. Okay, I'm going to use these as a placeholder. Oh, and then Frank said, "Have I read Texas Freeze yet?" No, I haven't, dude. You sent me a link to it? But the problem is with links that are just random links. I never know if somebody's account got hacked. So was that actually a link to your comic? Because in that case, I will check it out. I'm always leery to click a PDF that's or like a link to something that's sent to me that requires like a download or something like that, because yeah, I mean, like Facebook, people's Facebooks get hacked all the time. Okay, cool. I'll have to read it. I have 2 comics I have to read. The only thing I've allowed myself to do that wasn't working on comics for fun was watching Obi-Wan. That's all I've allowed myself to do. But I need to read Jason's book too, Jason Alexander. It arrived in the mail, and so I need to read that, and I need to read now Texas Freeze. I'm kind of excited about that. That'll actually be really good. And I'm kind of glad you wrote a story about that because again, I think it's an intriguing plot. Okay, we're gonna start with the easy thing here, which will be like a painting that I think I don't have to replicate again for another 2 pages or something till I have another scene in this area. And some of this is really abstract. Like it's far enough away and as ancillary of detail. I don't even know if ancillary is the right word for it, but it seems like a small enough detail to where I can get away with a little bit of liberties on it. The thinking is that these are like kind of family tree type scenarios. So as long as I'm kind of creating that um, perception a little bit, then we should be good. But yeah, these will take a little bit of time. Each one of these little portraits, especially the ones that repeat, because then I have to match the colors. Like if I didn't have to match if it was just a one-off illustration, this would be like quick and dirty and done. Um, so Landon, I need to check out that. I think I'm following you on Instagram too, so I'm gonna have to check out your paintings after I read Texas Freeze. I'm gonna have to check those out. I do love painting though, but the funny thing is I'm all over the place with my tastes in art too. I feel like people who limit themselves to like one genre of art really do themselves a disservice too, because there's so much good art out there. Like I like some weird stuff too. Like I think like the Dada movement I think is amazing. I like I even like I like Warhol. I know a lot of guys hate Warhol. I like Warhol. Um I like some Rothko, which is crazy because it's like Rothko just did like paint on canvas. I like a lot of like artists, but I also I like the Hildebrands and I like Frazetta and a lot of the fantasy illustrators. I like all kinds of stuff. That's I just think it's always lame when well, luckily I don't think that exists in the real world, but I remember in academia that was really annoying because there was this big divide between commercial and high art. And I remember like asking, because also, this has changed a lot in my lifetime. But like when I was going to school, there was still a big bias against comics. Um, and like this view that like comics weren't art. And I remember asking like a fine art teacher who was kind of going off about comics not being art, what they would classify Mouse as. And then they were like, well, I mean, that's art. I'm like, okay, well, but that's a comic book. Anyhow, it was just interesting how quickly like they would have these divisions and then they would erode with like 3 questions. And I think that tends to be where everyone's at. But I also think like, man, it's cool to just like going to an art museum and just kind of checking out, you know, like a Vermeer in person or something. It's like it's a cool experience, and I think cartoonists should do that. I think a lot of cartoonists do that, and I think if you're a cartoonist who isn't like occasionally going to an art museum or whatever, do it because it might expand your horizons on like what can be done, in comics. Like even the approach I'm using on this is kind of weird because that's not. I'm not saying other cartoonists haven't done this, but I am approaching this in a much more like rendery way because like why not? Like back in the day, the printing process would really limit what you could do, but you can pretty much do a comic book in any medium or any style nowadays. And like, there's no one, especially if you're doing indie comics, like, this is something, okay, I'm going to ramble now, but something that, like, don't get me wrong. I mean, like, even two stories, right? It's black and white. It's done in a lot of traditional tools and stuff like that. But what bums me out sometimes when you see like Kickstarters for like indie comics, and I'm not saying this is always bad, but it's like when like indie comics start just looking like cheaper versions of like mainstream comics, like what's the point? Like I feel like we should be. I'm just saying, like, let's push it a little bit. Let's try different things, try different approaches, try different styles, try different. It doesn't always have to look the same. That's one of the fun things about indie comics. If you ever want like just some mad inspiration for cartooning and stuff, it's just like check out Raw. It's like this crazy, you know, I mean, like just crazy variety of styles, and it like the Raw issues that were being published, by Spiegelman, like back in the '80s, like they're just an incredible variety of like style and really inspiring, and I feel like we could do more of that in indie comics. Doing the traditional stuff is good too, but I think sometimes it would be fun to see. Like it is cool that Jeff painted a comic. It'd be fun to see that. Landon said his wife says he needs to go to sleep. I understand. My wife will be saying the same in a little bit. Although hopefully I can, finish up these portraits. That's my goal here. Is these portraits need to be done. This guy was going to be like some ancient warrior in the family or something. Anyhow, the thing that I do like is outside of academia, I tend to think like most people view like art as art and realize that like, hey, um like kids books are important, because people have kids and then they realize like, hey, these are really important things for like children, and it's like there's kids books that'll have more of an impact on a human being's development and growth than like any high art crazy like Watchmen-y epic novel you can write. So arguably, it's like some of the most impactful art you can do is like children's art. But that's a genre that like people belittle sometimes, and um, I think less so now, because again, like I think when you get out of like the academic circles and more into kind of like the real world, people just like what they like. People like Breaking Bad and they like uh, Game of Thrones. Like it's not all, it's not always. I don't know. I do like that part of our modern pop culture is the fact that there's so much variety in like what people like. That I think there's less, as polarized as things get, I think there's less polarization when it comes to style. These paintings I do want to have like kind of more muted in the background, so they just kind of almost stand out like a little background thing. I'm still not sure about that yellow. I feel like it's too distracting. If you guys are in the chat still, let me know what you think about the yellow walls. I feel like they might be a little too distracting. Okay, so I'm going to play the trailer for Jacob's Apartment before we get into this beast, because each one of these paintings I'm going to have to color 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Make sure the color is accurate on them. So before we get into that annoyance, here, I'll zoom in a little bit just so you guys can see color. What do you guys think of that yellowy color? Is it working? Is it not? I definitely realize if I am going to go with a yellow, I should probably go with a complement here and have this more of like a purple. So I wonder if I went to like its complement a little bit. Maybe it goes a little brighter. Yeah, Philip was saying, yeah, the yellow's a little bright. I agree. I'm gonna see what I can do. I do want it to be a little brighter, but I don't think I want it to be like shockingly brighter. So, okay, I'm gonna play the Jacob's apartment thing while you guys think about that yellow. I think maybe we need to mute it down a little bit. Let's see. So I think even if it's just a little bit dimmer, like it's a little more like a wood tone, and then the saturate. No, I'm just kidding. I think that works a little bit better. Let me see. Yeah, I think that works quite a bit better. Yeah. Yep, that's the tone. Okay, I'm gonna play the trailer for Jacob's Apartment, my graphic novel that's coming out on. Oh my gosh, my brain is blanking out. On the 7th, on June 7th. So here's the trailer, and we'll be right back to finish up this page. And I appreciate you guys for hanging in there with me while I fight this battle of making art. All right, here we go.
Speak clearly, it seems that only in dreams can we these things we've seen and walk around breathing pain. I don't know the part to play in this heart of mine. There's dissonant things, they split at the seams.
All right, so now we're gonna make one of these paintings work a little bit. Let me get back to a color within the tone. Okay. Philip said you've almost got the primaries going there. The yellow walls, the blue doors, and the brown banister is slightly on the red side. Yeah. I'm trying to go with like kind of an analogous palette, and then the blue door will kind of pop a little bit, but we'll kind of see where we go to it. I tend to use like very primary level colors. Whoa. I was on StreamYard when I hit like the hide button, and so it hid the window rather than I was trying to hide the selection. Okay. So let's see here. Fun Photoshop problems, you guys. All right. Let's see. I want this to be like a skin tone a little bit of a skin tone. Maybe it's like more muted. I actually really like coloring comics and stuff, but it's an interesting challenge with like this room in particular. I had a much clearer vision in my head of how the interior of her room would look. Um, and I'm thinking in reality, these walls might have just been white, so we might go with that as well. That might be a bit much, but we'll see. Um, I'm still not necessarily sold on that color yet, and I have to pick, understanding that that color is going to dictate quite a lot of pages. But the style that I'm choosing here isn't going to use a lot of wild like color variations. Like the nice thing about, say, like working with oh, wait a minute, we have to do every single one of these. Here's the fun part of this. Okay, you have to do every single one of these. Okay. Hmm. Okay. So anyhow, the fun thing about the style, like working in other styles, is you can start getting into like rendering the color and stuff like that. But I put a limitation, partially just because of the quantity of, uh, of art that I have to get done for this. But aside from that, like just for the aesthetic of it, like I think this style is going to work a lot better where the black color, like the black over it, is actually making all of the value differences in the color, rather than having a lot of value variation, like rendering and stuff on the actual color. If this were like more of an open line style, then it would be kind of neat because you could take flats like this and kind of render them out so they pop a little more. But the nice thing is my shading is doing a lot of that on its own. So, but I do like looking at the color now. It is feeling a little more harmonic. I like how the yellow is bouncing off of kind of like the purple shadows, and so that's creating a little bit. I think that might be why I liked the yellow. Was I have these kind of purplish colors in place for the black maid's outfit and stuff like that, and so I think it's working. I don't know. I'm rambling, but I do think we're close, you guys. If you're in the chats though and you think otherwise, you're just like, dude, you are a lunatic. These colors are not working. Let me know. And if you're like really insistent on it, give me a super chat and I might change it. Who knows? um, but I do like messing with color. I also love comics and I love traditional comics as well. As much as I was talking about, like it being important, I think, for artists to like you know, check out the greats, check out all the masters, like study art history just a little bit. But also, you know, kind of fun. Ooh, How did that get selected? I think he was like a blue. Well, we're going to have to get back there. We'll get back there in a second once we get back to this. There's one color tone that's missing. He's got like a copper head because it's so muted. I will say, like, one of my favorite colorists in comics is Dave Stewart. He uses a lot of like muted tones and just says so much with so little. Like, I don't know if that makes sense, but I think he's probably one of the best. And he can go crazy rendered too with his stuff, but like the style he uses in Hellboy is amazing. Which these will not live up to that quality of color, you know. There's, you know, that would be like me trying to do like an action comic and pretend that I could somehow outdo Kirby, you know. There's just there's just some guys that are just like incredible. And that's not a cop out, you know. Obviously you want to try and get better and stuff like that, but anyhow, rambling here. Okay, we're gonna have this color, this next color is gonna be like a very muted like white, but it's not quite white. So that's what we're gonna do next. How's everybody doing? Are you guys working on stuff? Are you enjoying it? I hope you guys are making good progress on your stuff. I feel like half the game here, like, you know, what am I? What was I thinking? Okay, so I think if you guys are ever bored, just like check out Ash Shaw, his work. I'd love to hear what you guys think about it. I think it's great, but it's like it's interesting to see how some cartoonists react to Dash Shaw because like it's definitely not your traditional cartooning, but it's great stuff. It's like it's just super indie and kind of weird and like done in its own way, and I kind of love that about his stuff, you know. Kevin Huzanga would be another guy to check out. He does much more of like a almost like a Hurge style. He did a comic called Curses that I loved a lot a couple of years back. Just seeing the variety, I think, of like the variety of what you can do is really cool, is all I'm saying. At least it's really inspiring to me because it makes me realize like some of the limitations, you know, we put on ourselves as artists are like, you know, they're artificial, like they don't exist, there are no rules, you know, right? Like I don't know if that makes sense. Like sometimes I'll forget that there's no rules. And that can be dangerous, right? With art. I mean, you need to set up rules to kind of be able to do it okay, you know, but like, yeah, just don't forget, like, those aren't really rules. Like, I don't know. I guess there's rules to certain things like anatomy or whatever. But every rule can be broken and broken really effectively and beautifully. You know, I think that's the fun part about comics. That was verging on danger there in color. Let's see where we're at. I don't know if I like that thing. There we go. And we'll do. Okay. We're doing some really weird muted but saturated colors here, guys. Frank said, I am prepping a PDF of the thumbnail pages for Captain Goggles and Mask Woman comic. He said, I'll post it as Gumroad as a behind the scenes sketchbook. Awesome. That sounds great, Frank. Frank was on Gary Hodges' stream this morning, which was a really cool stream. Felt bad because I missed it. I've just had like nonstop sick for like the last, and I don't want this to sound like a complaint. It's like luckily it's not COVID. That's good. Like I tested clear of that. But I gotta say, like whatever the hell I picked up a couple weeks back, it will not go away. Like my throat is hurting. My throat doesn't hurt as much, but it feels like it moved into a sinus infection. And then my doctor's kind of attitude about it was kind of like, well, first off, it's like really hard to get any doctor thing. Second off, I hate going to the doctor, so I usually put it off to like the last second. And then thirdly, if there is a thirdly, I feel like there was a thirdly. Like I would be heading towards a thirdly if I was saying numbers there. But I do think, oh yeah. So thirdly, like I finally got like a e-visit kind of thing, and their response to what I know is a sinus infection because it's still sticking around. It's like a cough. It doesn't seem like infectious anymore. I mean, I know I'm doing a lot of like self-assessment there, but it's like you kind of get to an age where you like, especially if you're like me and you get like I get sinus infections all the time. So it's like I know what it feels like to have one. I can tell it's just hanging out there. I need the antibiotic for it. But their response was just kind of like, yeah, just see how it goes, and then we'll see. It's like, well, I mean, because I think they were saying like you haven't been sick that long, and I'm like, I don't know if you guys heard me right when I was saying I've been like sick for like 2 or 3 weeks. Like this isn't out of the blue. Anyhow, whatever. Now I'm just rambling about sickness, but my point is, I haven't been feeling 100% at all, and so it kind of sucks because it's like even things like Gary's stream, like I kind of missed it because just honestly I'm just not feeling 100% yet. So hopefully I can get back to like kind of feeling like myself. Like I don't know if that makes sense. I'm sure you guys can relate because I'm sure there's a lot of people probably dealing with like way more serious stuff than just like a simple sinus infection. I had somebody on Twitch, which I have like 3 followers on Twitch. But anyhow, there's a bot on Twitch that was commenting that they want me to buy followers. Interesting. Thank you, Twitch bot. I need to somehow figure out how to get mods on Twitch, but it doesn't seem worthwhile when I have like 3 followers on there. But if I start having more followers on Twitch and it's in need of moderation, I don't know. Frank, are you able to like mod Twitch and YouTube? I don't know. I think I'd probably want to find somebody else because I wouldn't want to like overburden Frank with like too many modding duties. Frank is like super mod. He's already like modding like a million different channels. I don't know if I want. I feel bad if I added one. Damn. I'd have to ask Frank for advice on that too. I don't know if Frank knows Twitch that well. I don't know Twitch at all, so like that well. And I say that as I'm being streamed to Twitch. So all right. Let's see here. So I'm glad Philip said something about the yellow, because we knocked back the yellow a little bit. I do think this is working reasonably better. And we're almost finished with these paintings, you guys. That's one painting down. So one thing you guys might notice too during these streams, because of the sick thing, and again, not trying to make it an excuse or anything, but I might occasionally put the trailers on a little more frequently, and that's just because, as corny as it is, I get a little easily winded with this like sinus nonsense. So, oh, Frank said he can switch back and forth. Cool. So Frank, at some point, maybe off stream, you can walk me through how to mod you on Twitch. If I can even have a mod yet. I literally have like 2 followers. So, but it might be a good idea because I do enjoy reading the Twitch bots, but it might be fun to be able to, moderate it. Frank says he's been on it, but as a chatter. Cool. Okay. Wait, Frank, are you the bots? That would be hilarious. Frank's like randomly going, "Hey, buy followers on Frank's side gig." Okay, I do like the idea of this being the direct complement of the color next to it, so we're going to do that. And then we'll kind of work from there. So, and these portraits will become more important, and there will be portraits that I research and do with a lot more detail and care as the story goes on, because you'll see that one portrait ends up being fairly significant to a plot point in the future. But right now, we literally have the maid. This is one of the funny things about comics. If you're reading this, at this point, you're maybe a minute into the book. But right now, the maid, oh, why am I doing background there? I need to deselect that. Just doing this one lady, her background. I thought I was on to saying something about something being funny, and now I have completely lost my train of thought. Oh, I think I was saying something about the timing of comics is like it, and then I was going to kind of walk people through. So basically, we're at this point in the story where the maid is kind of on the lookout, about to open the door. Then she notices that Mr. Barrett comes downstairs saying, "What are you on about, Wilson?" And she's like, "Oh, observing the weather, sir." And he's like, "Cloudy as usual. Isn't there something you should be doing?" And she goes, "Yes, sir." Starts walking up the stairs, looks back as he leaves, runs the door, and opens it. So that's kind of what's going on here. Clearly, something's going on behind Mr. Barrett's back, as well as it should be. And a lot of these early pages are just establishing very well, trodden territory if you're familiar with the Brownings. If you're not familiar with the Brownings, this is just kind of going over the main portion that people tend to make like the main story when they write about the Brownings. But we're doing it in about 20 pages. And then from there, it gets into some really, I mean, it's a significant part of the story, right? But it gets into some territories that have never been written about the Brownings and get really fun. And we're talking, some supernatural, awesome business going on. So, should be fun. But for now, we're kind of establishing a little bit of the background for people like me who, like, prior to my sister writing the script, I didn't know a ton about the Brownings. I definitely didn't study poetry a lot. I like poets, but I was not, an expert on uh, on the Barretts or anything like that. And this has been really fun in that sense too, because I've learned a lot in doing this. It's like I feel like I'm getting to. I guess maybe we can talk about that. Maybe if I'm ever asked about like the process of doing historical fiction um, and illustrating it at least, it's really cool because it's like I kind of have to do a lot of what the writer had to do. Um, because you kind of have to backtrace it because anytime a new character is mentioned, you're like, oh, does that character exist? Is this like, are there pictures of this person? Oh, there's a room. Do we have reference to that room? Do we know where that room was located? Do we know what was in the room? Like, so every choice you make, you kind of have to cross check, I think. And that's kind of fun. But it's also a nice way you end up learning like a crap load about, like I know so much more about the Brownings now. And the cool thing is, when we're done with this book, so will you guys, in theory, right? So, yeah. But like on the previous one, I think Caligula was watching, buddy of mine from art school, who I think he had the same painting teacher. Got to check on that, but I'm pretty sure he had the same painting teacher. I don't know if he did though, but I do know he's done like traditional painting and stuff like that. Um, and he uses a lot of mixed media. Actually, he probably paints more frequently than I do. But anyhow, he was watching a stream before and was like kind of complimenting the maid, uh, like finding kind of like that era of maid's outfit, and then also being able to turn it around rather than just sort of, you know, like again, if you're doing illustrations for like a single illustration, it's like you don't need a ton of reference, but when you're dealing with like historically trying to be historically accurate with things, and you're dealing with like a costume that you have to show like 50 different ways, that becomes interesting. You're like, where's the hemline? Like, did they have like how did they tie the you know back of the outfit? Like, what was the style of it? And then you just do your best rough approximation of it and probably get it wrong. I'm sure there's like a historian somewhere that's going to be like, you know, there'll be that Chuck Taylor moment for me too. I call it the Chuck Taylor moment because it's like in Braveheart when you see like a battle scene and and you find out that like you notice like wait a minute, one of those guys is wearing like sneakers, like because they didn't notice the like an extra, like even with like a full production crew and stuff, every once in a while like a pair of sneakers sneaks in there, you know. I kind of want this to have like a sepia background ish. I think that would work. But I want it to look a little different from the wood. So maybe we go darker and richer. There we go. Go a little more saturated there. Okay. You guys, we're getting close to done. I'm really excited about this. So Landon, I think I'll check out your Instagram. Frank, do you have a link to Landon's Instagram just in case? I'm pretty darn sure I'm following him, but might be cool to put it in there for anybody who might be watching after the fact. I feel like I want to check that out. I want to check out Landon's um, work. I'm pretty sure I've already seen it and that I'm following him, but I want to refamiliarize myself. Because yeah, it's always fun to see some paintings, you know. Do do do. I know it's weird to be like I guess there's a couple ways you could go about this. Like you could make this as a solid background, color it, and then do your characters as solid foreground and color them, and almost treat it like animation, where like your characters can move wherever they want. Um, that's a really good way to build files, especially if you're going to be reusing backgrounds and stuff. And I might do that if I were working in a different style, but I feel like doing this a little different. Thanks, Frank. That would be cool. Frank said I will grab it. Unless it's distracting you from your comics or something, buddy. So I definitely don't want to take you away from your creativity too. That's something I talked about a little bit on Artcasters, but I guess I can touch on here too, where I really like doing these streams and hanging out with people. Um, and I like the idea of making content that is on YouTube and is functioning a little bit to promote my work. Hopefully, is helpful and interesting to like people who tune into it, but also doesn't interfere with the production of my artwork because it's like, you know, like this year I have to do like 230 of these pages, so I can't afford to have like editing and like a bunch of time. I just don't have the time to kind of put into like more complex YouTube stuff. So I feel like these streams function really well to kind of fill some of that need. And also, honestly, I enjoy them. I enjoy hanging out with you guys. Thanks. Cool. Okay, so it's Huber.Landon. And then Landon, I hope I'm pronouncing it right too. It's Huber, correct? Um, but anyhow, so I'm going to check out that probably like right after the stream. And I really want to check out Texas Freeze. I feel like, Frank, didn't you already? I feel like I've seen Texas Freeze, but I want to see it again. I guess I'll have to look at it again. But I feel like when maybe it was just when you did it that you had kind of shown me some of the pages or something. But I'm eager to kind of check it out again. I will say one thing about working on a heavy amount of comics and then having a day job on top of that. Often I'll feel like my brain was just thrown into a blender. So if I ever seem like a little, I guess that sounds like an excuse, but it's like if I ever seem like a bit brain blenderish, it's because my brain is literally pretty flooded with it. It's like the tank, the capacity of my brain is at full, um, and I'm running on Steam constantly. So yeah, I don't know, but it's also kind of a fun place to be. All right, and it's a challenging place to be because you're like, okay, I have to function with my brain all cloudy and flooded. All right, now we're going to do Jim Luhan has a new cartoon up called Sugar Machine. It's very funny. There's a heist. And I believe Gary Hodges did a voice for it. It's great. You guys should check it out. Make sure you're supporting Jim Luhan, one of the smartest people within our community. Well, look at that, you guys. I think we're done. I do want to mess with this yellow a bit because I'm not sure about it. I might be overthinking it. Well, let's make sure we've saved. I'm going to start with just primaries and see if any of these are working better. And then I'll mute it down again. So I do feel like the yellow might be better. I mean, it's going to create more contrast with like the orange if you have like a blue, like. We could also just go with white, which was more realistically what the walls were, but I just feel like that's too distracting. Go with like more of a cream. Could be just a matter of sweet. I think I somehow got a raid. I didn't know they did raids on YouTube, but thank you, Sticky Art. That's cool. Sticky Art just raided my stream. I appreciate that. That's cool. I forgot that they're doing raids nowadays on YouTube. That's pretty cool. And then Ag says, "Cool art, dude. Thank you." Oh, Sticky Art said, "LOL. YouTube doesn't, but I do." That's cool. Well, Sticky Art, it's nice to meet you and your community. Thanks for coming by and checking out the stream. We're about to wrap. I'm kind of trying to figure out. Maybe you guys can chime in on this. So we're wrapping this page. I'm working on page 15 of a graphic novel about Elizabeth Barrett Browning that I got a publishing deal for, and I'm doing the coloring and the art and stuff on live streams. And right now I'm about to wrap coloring page 15, but I'm not sure like about the color of the background of the room. Like I like all the other colors, but I'm not sure if this yellow is really the best choice. So I can kind of take the shading off so you can see more just the pure color, but that's what I'm trying to kind of figure out. I like that. Modder said, it's not Twitch, it's YouTube, but we still do raids. I love it. Yeah, YouTube's more my my favorite format, so I appreciate you guys doing raids. And I also coughed, so there you go. But I do appreciate that. That's a cool idea. I feel like when I'm done with my streams, I don't know. I feel like I should send people somewhere. It's not a bad idea. How do you guys? Well, I'll have to. You guys should subscribe and let me know how you do it in the comments. Let me know. I'm curious how you go about raids. And then Modder said Sticky just died. So I think he's changing the names, but that's cool. YouTube is actually in the process of doing it. They just announced it. That's cool. Okay, so for color in the background, what do you guys think? That's what I need right now is like for people to give me feedback on the color. Do you think like a purple That's what I'm trying to kind of figure out here. Because the yellow was kind of the way I was going to try to pop the complement of like the purple that's on her, like her dress, and on his jacket it's like a purpley shadow. But I'm thinking like if we want more of a blue territory, that might help cause like their faces to stand out more. But I'm just kind of curious what you guys are thinking. Sticky said, I've been following you for a couple of years and saw you were online. Well, thanks, man. Well, welcome. Yeah, okay, so yellow is the way to go. All right, cool. We're going to go back to that yellow. We might have to call it, which is a bummer because we have all these new people hopping on. Like, I want to stream longer now, but we just finished. I really appreciate you guys coming on. If you like art streams, I really, yeah, I appreciate new people hopping on. And make sure you're subscribed and you hit that bell so you get notified when I'm about to go live. And then if you guys also have like a channel or places that you are posting art and stuff like that, let me know. I'd love to subscribe and check out your stuff as well. All right, so there we go. Nice. That's cool. So Sticky said, I just shared your channel link in my chat and asked my chat to check you out. That's awesome. I think that's a really cool thing. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. I like that idea. And he said, I'll be streaming a lot again, and I stopped for last year. Oh, well, nice. I love it. Well, cool. So now I'm going to have to check out Sticky Art. Landon, I got to check out your Instagram. And yeah, I really appreciate the raid. That was kind of fun. All right, you guys. So I'm about to head out. I was going to say I do have 2 graphic novels out. One is 2 Stories, which is my graphic novel about faith and mental illness. And that's on Amazon to purchase right now. And it's like a autobiographical graphic novel done in the vein of like American Splendor. And then also we have Jacob's Apartment, which is my all ages graphic novel. And yeah, that is coming out on the 7th from Graphic Mundi. And I will also be in the Toronto area for TCAF, doing signings at Graphic Mundi booth toward the end of June. And so yeah, pre-order Jacob's Apartment. Stop by at TCAF. If not TCAF, I'll be doing signings at the Barnes & Noble Palmdale as well in July. And then if you haven't yet, hit subscribe, hit the bell, all that fun stuff. And then also, yeah, check out Frank, my mod for the channel. He's got digital comics, Gumroad link, and Frank's a rad dude. And then we got Philip saying there's some drama around TCAF now. Oh no. Well, hopefully TCAF's still on because I got tickets, and that would suck. Because I'm flying to Toronto, so if it's not happening, that would be a problem. Let's see, and then also Frank gave a link to Sticky Art too. So thanks you guys for stopping by. I'm gonna head out and get some sleep. And I guess, Philip, you were asking what color we thought with the yellow. And it turns out, it sounds like the consensus was to stick with kind of the yellow. So I think we're good. So I'm gonna call that a day. I'll send this to my publisher, and then tomorrow, I should be hopefully streaming either tomorrow or the next day when we take this rough and start making this into the next page. So thanks you guys, and have a good night, and I will see you guys on the next stream. Bye.